Here's what you missed on the Mike Brown Morning Show.
On Sunday's Best last year. But listen, good morning. Thank you for rocking with us this morning. This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. We're going to talk a little bit today about, there was a period of time in America where black people were, I don't want to use the word free, but for lack of a better word, I'm going to use it. There was a time in America post-slavery, very shortly after slavery, that black people were probably the most free that we ever were as related to our relationship with this country that we know and that we call the United States of America. It was short-lived, but we're going to get into it and we're going to talk about it. It was a time called Reconstruction. And there's going to be something that I'm going to play for you that's going to really open your eyes as it relates to Reconstruction. So I got to give a shout out to, even before we get into it, I got to give a shout out to Erica Campbell for posting it. And then shout out to the big homie Jimmy Smith in Atlanta for posting it. And so we're gonna play that. It's about a 12-minute video. It's very educational, but the reason I like to bring stuff up like this is because we've heard it said, and I believe that it's true, if you don't know your history, it's easy to repeat. And so some things in history we want to address. We don't necessarily want to repeat, but we want to know so we'll know how to moving forward. The more things change, the more things stay the same. And history will repeat itself, but this time we want to be found on the right side of history. So we educate ourselves, we find out where we need to be so that we can be on the right side. All right, so that's going to be a little heavy this morning. It's going to make you feel some kind of way. So I'm going to do my best to keep you uplifted this morning. I'm going to play great music, keep you uplifted. As a matter of fact, I'm going to start it off with one of my favorite songs. It's by Fred Hammond, Show Yourself Strong. God, we need you to show yourself strong. And listen, we're going to be all right. There are rough days ahead. Don't get me wrong now. There are some rough days ahead, but we're putting the time in now so we'll know what God would have for us to do. And I promise you, if you invest in knowledge, invest in knowing where I need to be, invest in building relationship with God through Jesus Christ, you're going to be all right. I promise you'll be all right. You just must do those things. Listen, don't go anywhere. I'll be back. It's the Mike Brown Morning Show.
Wake up. Right here.
The Mike Brown Morning Show.
Wake up, baby, won't you wake up? Hit it in the morning.
Heard weekdays 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time, right here on the Urban Uplift.
There was a time in America where the parties, the popular parties that we know, the main two parties that we know of, Republican and Democrat, there was a time that they were not the only two political parties, and there also was a time where the values or the views or opinions or however you want to say that, they were much different. It was almost like they switched sides, or it's almost like they were opposite in how they believe and what they think or who they support or supported. So that's a bit of history that you may have to go back and do yourself to really understand the thing of it all. Now, I always tell you, as black people, we're really at a disadvantage either way, being Democrat or Republican. But you need to understand that one party doesn't have your best interests at heart over the other party. And you'll probably grow tired of me saying this, but it remains true. And I have to say it, especially this climate that we're in, we don't have our problem in America is not a political problem per se, or a party problem, or a partisan problem. Our problem is racism. And it's a deep-rooted problem. Think about it. Just yesterday was Indigenous people. That was the day that we were supposed to observe them. But here's the problem. And somebody probably came up with that later on. But the day is called Columbus Day. I didn't say anything about it yesterday because it really is of no effect to me. I really careth not. But when you think about the people that were here first, then, I mean, respect and honor goes to them. But you see how America tainted that. And so America is built on lies. The land of the free and the home of the brave is built on a lie. And so anything that has a false foundation is going to have to eventually be rebuilt. Friends, I want you to know that America is getting ready to go through a time of rebuilding. And it's very important that we position ourselves in the right place. I can't say it enough. I can't stress it enough. There are going to be some rough days ahead. There's a window of time that we have to get ourselves together. It's no mistake that God orchestrated this whole coronavirus thing the way that he did. It's strategic, and you have to spend some time with them to really get. And I'm not saying this literally. Well, when I say the mind of God, I mean we'll never be able to grasp his thoughts and his ways, but just a download. Spend some time with him so you can gain the perspective of where we are. I'm telling you, if you position yourself right, you're going to the blessings that are going to come your way in the midst of because it's going to be haywire. But the blessing of the Lord that's going to come to his people that recognize where we are, I'm telling you, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. So earlier I told you there was a period in our country after slavery called Reconstruction. I'm going to read up on it a little bit. But let me just give you my own little personal synopsis of it all. So in order to win, well, first of all, there was a civil war in America. Most of us know that. The Civil War was an internal war, meaning that it was an American war. It was within these United States before they're called the United States. It was here. It was the war was the northern states against the southern states. Now you'd have to go and do your history to understand all that the war entailed. See, we're led to believe that the war was about slavery or about slaves being freed. That became a great big part of it, but that wasn't all of it. I'll just say it like that. A war was not started so that slaves could be free. Now, there were some economics at play. there was some power moves at play. Certain people not willing to give up certain power. So what happens is, as time goes on, you got to, again, read up on this. Don't just take my word or my version. So as the war goes on, then slavery becomes a part of the conversation. And freeing slaves becomes a part of the conversation. Now, again, it's almost looked at as if the North wins, then the slaves are free. Yeah, maybe, but not quite. It's all about documentation and when documentation is signed or whatever. So, and the reason that all happened is because, I guess the reason it could be perceived like that is because when the South, for lack of a better word, I can't find the right word right now, but surrendered. When the South surrendered, then I guess that's looked at as a time where the slaves are now free. So, but it's really when the documentation was signed, the abolishment agreement. So during this time, though, the North, or the Union, actually were really both sides. They solicited black soldiers to fight in the war. And that was a great deal too, of if you fight, at the end of the war, you could be free. On the northern side anyway. So you gonna fight for your freedom. If you tell me at the end of this I'm gonna be free, then chances are I'm gonna fight, right? So the North wins, they prevail, the Union. So during this period, because it was a civil war, it was an internal war, a war against ourselves. At the end of the war, they still had to be in this country. That's why it is today, 2020, more than 100 years later. I mean, way over 100 years later. You can still go to some parts of the South and even probably some hick towns in the North and still see Confederate flags hanging. Confederate flags flying. People with Confederate decals on their cars and in their car windows. Because when the war was over, they still had to stay here. They still had to be in America. Now, the truth of the matter is, when we see those flags, I like to call it treason. I would like to call it a crime against our country. And I think it should be punishable up to jail time. Because that does not represent who we are. It's a direct insult, in fact, to who we are. But this is so important. And this is where we're headed to. Just because they lost the war does not mean they changed who they were. Just because they lost the war doesn't mean they changed how they felt. It just meant that they had to play by certain rules. And please understand that it burnt them up then, and it still burns them up today. This is why I always say, and to all of my white brothers and sisters that may be listening, I love you. I just have to, it's a certain way that I have to give this information. That's why I always say that there is not a partisan problem in America. It's a race problem. It's a white against black problem. Now there's some other races that's at play here, but this problem is a white against black problem. Because if I'm white, there is an automatic privilege that I just have, period. If I'm black, the mindset is I'm subservient. I'm less than, because for most of the time we've been here, we have been treated as less than. But isn't it something how they always need us? They needed us to till their land. They needed us to raise their children. They needed us to cook their food. They needed us to, in recent history, after all of the years of killing us for this right, now they need us to vote. They always need us. And here it is. They need us, and they've needed us more than we need them. But here is the difference. Our minds, oh my God, our minds weren't free. We weren't free in our minds. Now, there were a group of people. There's always going to be some witnesses. There were some people after slavery that were free. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, they were. Let me tell you why they were free. Because those people became mayors, representatives in the state and the United States. And they couldn't stop them. Why couldn't they stop them? Because they had to free them because they helped them win the war. That's why slavery became on the table. That's the main reason. But everybody didn't get a chance to be free in their mind. So, as a matter of fact, you know the story. The people, the Texas slaves, it was 2 years later. You mean to tell me we've been free for 2 years? Imagine the ones that, see, you got to understand. Think about the perspective of it all. We live in a technology age. We were born into a technology age. Our parents were born into a technology age as it relates to the technology that was available then. If some news broke, let's just say you lived in let's say you lived in Mississippi. If some news broke in DC, if you are a slave, how long you think it's going to take you to get that news? Because first of all, a lot of slaves were already illiterate. That's number one. Number two, they kept information from slaves. It ain't like they had a relationship with master. Then they separated the slaves. So the house nigga, they didn't know they didn't talk to this field. And then, not only that, they made them fight amongst themselves based on their skin color. So it was always divide and conquer. So even if some information did get out, it was a chance that the majority of the slaves wouldn't have known about it. But again, thank God for the ones that had the wherewithal to get into government. So I had to say all that to bring us here. They hated us so much that they found a way to take away what it is we fought for, and that was our freedom. We wouldn't have fought in the Civil War if we weren't going to be free at the end of it. Now, so I'm going to play this clip, and I want you to understand that what you hear in this clip is not just for the demographic that the clip is talking about, or the geographical area, I should say. It's not just for that area. This happened all over the country. And parts of it could happen again, but we want to be on the right side of history. So listen to this, and I'll be back.
Library in Wilmington, North Carolina. There was one thing you weren't allowed to research.
We were refused. We were rejected by the librarian.
When I asked about or inquired about 1898, they wanted to know why.
I was told that, yes, they had something, but they kept it under lock and key.
The story of Wilmington in 1898 still isn't widely known.
What happened here on what's now just this empty patch of grass would radically change racial politics in North Carolina.
This is the story of an American election, but also of something we don't usually find in American history: the violent overthrow of a democratically elected government. In the late 1800s, Wilmington, North Carolina was the state's largest city. It had a majority black population, and historians today describe it as a rarity in the post-Civil War American South.
Wilmington, prior to November 1898, was what the New South could be at the cusp of the 20th century.
There was an unusual degree of black prosperity.
In Wilmington, there were successful black entrepreneurs, doctors, teachers, but also black elected officials. And for a time, that was true throughout the state. Take a look at the politicians on this poster of the 1889 North Carolina House of Representatives. Here at the bottom are black Republican representatives, some from Wilmington. North Carolina also sent 4 black Republicans to the U.S. Congress between 1875 and 1899. The Democratic and Republican parties of 1898 in many ways occupied opposite parts of the political spectrum than they do today.
Most African Americans were voting for the Republican Party, and the Democratic Party was white voters almost exclusively. White supremacy was the central focus of the platform for the Democratic Party.
Republicans in North Carolina were successful in part because of a third party called the Populist Party, made up of mostly white farmers fed up with the tough economic times. North Carolina populists joined up with Republicans to form what they called the Fusion Party. And in the elections of 1894 and 1896, the Fusion Party defeated the Democrats in sweeping victories statewide. That meant North Carolina now had a government that shared power between black and white politicians, including a newly elected Republican governor. Together, they moved towards reforms that would favor black Americans and working class whites.
This was something that the Democratic Party folks were simply not going to accept.
A multiracial government wasn't just a disappointment for Democrats. It was more like a humiliation. They needed a plan to take back control of the state in the next election. So party leaders like Furnifold Simmons, future U.S. Senator, Charles Aycock, future North Carolina governor, and this man, Alfred Moore Waddell, came up with one: to beat the Fusion Party by luring white populist voters away from their alliance with black voters. Wilmington, with a large black population and a local fusion government in power, would be a focus of their campaign. The state Democratic Party handbook for 1898 laid out their goal: consolidate the white vote by stoking white anger and resentment. It said, "This is a white man's country, and white men must control and govern it." Their most effective tool was the media. One of North Carolina's biggest newspapers was a Democratic Party mouthpiece. It ran racist political cartoons throughout 1898.
Not everybody was literate in 1898, but to see a political cartoon of the type that ran, you may not be able to read it, but you know exactly what it means.
Many of the cartoons were centered on the threat of Negro rule, even though the fusion government was mostly white. They also played up another fear.
Black men threatening white women became a theme. White men need to do all that they can to protect white womanhood.
This was all part of North Carolina Democratic strategy, but it echoed the national racist rhetoric of the time. In one speech that Democrats printed in a Wilmington paper, a prominent Georgia writer named Rebecca Felton said,
"If it takes lynching a black man a day to protect white womanhood, I say lynch."
Her speech prompted a Wilmington black man named Alex Manley, owner of the black-run Daily Record newspaper, to respond with a column. He made a simple observation that, at the time, was shocking.
That white women who had liaisons with black men did so voluntarily and enthusiastically.
Manley wrote, "Every Negro lynched is called a big burly black brute, when in fact many were sufficiently attractive for white girls to fall in love with them."
Manley pretty much said, in a nutshell, sometimes white women choose to be with black men.
Manley's editorial became another tool for Democrats. Newspapers reprinted it, called it a horrid slander, and ran comments about it on a daily basis. It was just a few months before the election, and white voters were angry.
By the time the election rolls around on November 8th, black voters, Republican voters, had been thoroughly intimidated here.
By all accounts, the elections of 1898 were a sham. The Democratic Party had a paramilitary group called the Red Shirts. They attacked and blocked black residents from voting. At a rally just before the election, Alfred Moore Waddell provoked the crowds. He said, "Negro office holding ought at once and forever be brought to an end, even if we have to choke the current of the Cape Fear River with carcasses." The votes were counted, and the Democrats won.
Democratic candidates won every seat they had a candidate up for election in.
But some local fusionist politicians remained in power because their seats hadn't been up for re-election, like the white Republican mayor and the Board of Aldermen. And of course, the election did nothing to undo the economic power black folks held in the city. The Democrats had won the election, but their goal of total white supremacist control remained out of reach.
And so they engineered what was essentially a coup d'etat.
The day after the election, at a gathering for white men in Wilmington, the Democrats unveiled a document called the White Declaration of Independence. It contained an ultimatum. Cynthia Brown, whose descendants were in Wilmington back in 1898, is a historian at her church where there's a preserved copy of the Declaration from the next day's newspaper.
"We will no longer be ruled and will never again be ruled by men of African origin."
They would strip black men of voting rights. They would give white men a large part of the employment heretofore given to black men. And as for Alex Manley, "We demand that he leave this city forever within 24 hours. The next morning, hundreds of white men marched to the offices of the Daily Record. Manley was gone. He had fled to save his own life. They set the Daily Record building on fire. This is where it once stood.
Once the white leadership destroyed Alex Manly's printing press, they destroyed one way in which the African American community in Wilmington could organize itself and keep itself informed.
At City Hall, the mayor and board of aldermen were forced out.
There's 200 armed men in City Hall at the time. They didn't do it of their own free will. And as they resigned, a new member selected by the Democratic Party was voted into office.
Waddell, who once threatened to fill the Cape Fear River with black bodies, was the new mayor of Wilmington. Meanwhile, the mob had grown to about 2,000 men, and the violence spilled into the streets. In these photos, X's mark where the first black residents were killed.
The stories are that they were dumped into the river, and there are varying stories about how many people were killed.
I see 40 to 60 clearly as fatalities as a result of the violence, but I think it was higher.
Many black residents hid for days in the swamps and the wooded cemeteries in the city, including Cynthia's great-grandmother. And thousands of other residents fled Wilmington, never to return. Shortly afterward, Democrats printed booklets celebrating a glorious victory, and in the newspapers depicted black residents as the instigators.
This image is a gross misrepresentation of what actually happened during 1898. You know, what you see is African American men with guns, not white men with machine guns.
The city never regained its black majority population. Jim Crow laws like literacy tests and poll taxes that prevented black people from voting were immediately enacted, and Wilmington's spirit of black opportunity was crushed. Black political representation in the state was over. It would be 90 years until North Carolina elected its next black Congress member.
Wilmington did a really great job of covering up a very dark past for a very long time.
Over the years, the textbooks on North Carolina's history have struggled to accurately describe what happened in 1898. This one from 1933 says the situation was unfortunate for both races. And this one from 1978 doesn't have that much more detail. But they both praise Charles Aycock, a politician who helped perpetrate the riot. They say he had a keen mind and a kind heart, and that, in fact, he was one of the best friends that the colored people had in the state. It's a legacy that North Carolina has yet to fully undo. The names of the perpetrators are on Wilmington's school buildings and city parks. But the legacy is also bigger than those names. Turn on the news, and the state's long history of political suppression echoes.
And we turn to a strict new voter ID law in North Carolina. Racial gerrymandering and a push for new voting maps.
The court says the Republican-led legislature redrew congressional districts along racial lines, violating the Constitution.
There's a tremendous amount of intimidation that is still felt by the black community.
It doesn't have to be mass mayhem and violence in the streets.
The strategy shifts towards designing state laws in such a way that you could exclude blacks from voter participation.
The subliminal pursuit of continuing the white Declaration of Independence.
And if you don't see it for what it really is, it can happen all over again.
So, that was a lot to take in. Very sad, very unfortunate. And all I want to say is, insert your state. That didn't just happen in North Carolina. That happened to us all over the country. They don't care about us. That's what I want us to come away with understanding. Yes, Donald Trump is a bad representation of what's presidential. But understand, because of the deep-rooted racism in this country. It doesn't matter who the president is. That's all I'm trying to get over to us. They want us to think that it matters who the president is. And so they divide us. We're divided based on stuff that doesn't even pertain to us. They're not thinking about us. They use us. And it has not changed. So, I want you to vote. But I don't want you to vote with the mindset that because I vote for Joe Biden, everything is going to be great. Those are lies straight from the pit of hell. Everything's not going to be great because you voted for Joe Biden. Don't think that. I want you to exercise your right, but I want you to get it right on, like I said last week, the local level. Find out who you need to vote for in your communities and in your states and your cities. Find all that out. Vote for those people. Now, do you see the resemblance in this story? And remember back, I think it was in April in Michigan, when that group of people went to the state house armed, like they was about to overthrow the government. And then, not only that, we see just last week that they had plans to overthrow the government. See, understand, in this story, that's how they changed in this story. And I believe this happened. Matter of fact, I know this happened all over the South. Because in the North, we really have black representation. But in the South, they had black representation because that's where all the slaves were. And if they won the war, then of course, if they citizens now, yeah, they're going to be in government because they free, right? But understand, this is how they overthrew them. And don't you think for 1 minute they didn't have allies from the North to help that happen. As a matter of fact, if you go into more federal government history, you'll find out that the president that lived in Ohio, I should know his name because my wife grew up in the city that he's from. I can't even think his name right. Hayes, I think it is. Weatherford B. Hayes. He had a lot to do with the reversal of Reconstruction or the tainting of Reconstruction on a national level, on a federal level. So, yeah, they had allies in Washington to make sure that these state overthrown or city overthrown governments could be validated, for sure. And so what happened here in Wilmington, North Carolina was just perpetuated over and over and over again. Because the truth of the matter is, when we built our own communities, I told you yesterday, when we built our own communities, when we had our own stuff, before somebody filled us with the need to be accepted by white people and want to be integrated for what? Now, I'm sorry. I went on a little tear there, a little rant. The only reason white people regained power is because they took it. Did you hear what happened in the story? They showed up on election day armed and basically said, I dare you. But before that, they created tension in our community. And then they created tension between the white people that did work with the black people in order to keep the Democrats out of power. They created tension. How did they do that? It's always a lie about a black man and a white woman. Now, sometimes it ain't a lie because white women like black men. This is the truth of the matter. And so when they started putting out the lie that black men was just after white women, taking white womanhood, then a black man stood up. He had his own newspaper. He had his own newspaper. You know they hated that. He stood up and said, well, they actually like black men. So don't think just because they caught up with each other that she didn't fall in love with him or she ain't in love with him. That incited the white community. But he was only responding to what they said. Doesn't he have freedom of speech as well? In his own newspaper? They didn't even have their own newspaper. Come on, y'all see what I'm saying? Then they show up on election day. Well, first they run him out of town. They say, if you want to live, leave. And he left. Then they burnt his building down. Then when they did that stood in it. That was the communication gap that black people had. That's how they were able to communicate with each other, because it was a black newspaper. Them white people weren't studying that. They weren't. Now they probably had spies, but they didn't care that we had our own newspaper. As a matter of fact, they probably thought it wasn't about nothing until it was. So, all I'm saying is, this takes me back to what I said yesterday. November 3rd, be prepared for almost anything. Now, I hope I'm wrong about this, but I got a feeling about that day that don't feel good. It's just not sitting well with me. I hope I'm wrong, and I'm praying that everything's okay and will be okay. But my advice to everybody that under the sound of my voice, whatever you got to do on November the 3rd, do it early. I'm going to need you to be at home by 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon to be at home. I mean, get your grocery, whatever you're going to do it in the top of the day. Go to the poll at 6 a.m. if you don't vote early. If you still have an opportunity to vote early, go ahead and do that. Because November 3rd I don't know, folks. I don't think we should be out like that. Are we going to pray that it doesn't go crazy? But this feeling that I have, and then based off what we see every day, I don't know. But what do I always say? We got to pray. All right, I'm going to get back to some great music. I'll come back with some more commentary. Go tell somebody to come listen with you, because it's the Mike Brown Morning Show. I'll be back.
Morning Show. Heard weekdays 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time, right here on the Urban Uplift.
Remember, we got some things happening here at the Mike Brown Morning Show that we need your help with promoting. One thing is, we have a YouTube channel. It's the Mike Brown Morning Show. All you have to do when you go to YouTube is just type that in, the entire title for now, until our algorithm is built up. But the Mike Brown Morning Show. And then you're gonna have to scroll down a little. Now, one of my cousins told me yesterday it came right up for them. If it doesn't come right up for you, just scroll down. You're either going to see, you're going to see a picture of me. You may see the profile picture that's on Instagram. If it's not that, it's going to be a picture of me. So the Mike Brown Morning Show, if it's not right there when you search, just scroll down. I need you to subscribe. Please subscribe. And then if you ever miss a show, make sure you go there so you can hear the show. Then on Instagram, I need you to, if you're not following me on Instagram, I need you to do that and tell other people to follow me there as well. And on Facebook, it's just Mike Brown right now. This is just a personal page. We're going to get back into the business-like page for the Mike Brown Morning Show. But right now, it's just a personal page. So, I mean, we can interact there as well. you'll see me post things for the Mike Brown Morning Show on Facebook as well. So I need you to go and like all of that stuff, share all of that stuff. It's greatly appreciated. I thank you in advance. Don't forget that we are going to be reading together as a community. And this is our first book. We won't stop here, but we're going to be reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I need you to have your copy of that book by Monday. Have it by Monday. And we'll be telling you how we're going to navigate through that. But next Friday, let me look at that exact date. Sometimes it'd be so hard to find your calendar on your phone. Next Friday, that's going to be the 24th. On the 24th of October, we're going to have a conversation, our first conversation about what it is we have read up to that point. So I need everybody to get your copy get your book, get it by, today is Tuesday, by Monday. I really want you to get it before then, but get it by the 19th. Okay? I'm sure you can go to Amazon and pick it up. There are many other online outlets if you want the actual copy in hand. Now, I'm one of those people that I like the actual copy in hand, so I feel you on that. But if that's something that you can't do, it is available digitally. If you have an Apple device, if you download the app that says Books, or it may just already be on your device. I think it's one of those apps that just comes with the device. It's called Books. Download that. Or go to open that app and type in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. To purchase a copy of it is $7.99. It's well worth the investment. Okay. Matter of fact, it's well worth the investment. So do that, and then you may stumble upon a copy at Walmart or Target. I don't know if bookstores are open, and I don't know if libraries are open. But if libraries are open, if a library is open in your city or state, then you can go to the library as well. And then if the bookstores are open, now it's going to be, of course, the hardback is going to cost more than $7.99, but whatever it costs is well worth the investment. So we're going to start with that. And is it the answer? Is it the end all be all? No, but it's a great start for us as a community to understand where we need to be. And so speaking of that, so remember, so you heard the story that I played about Wilmington, North Carolina. You heard them say that black people were doing well. And then we all know the story about Greenwood, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street. Black people were doing well. Even in Detroit, Black Bottoms, black people were doing well for themselves. So this is what I want you to know. That's coming back. Oh my goodness. See, it's coming back. And God is positioning us for it to happen. He already started it. Look at it. During the pandemic, it is the launching of the transference of wealth. It's the beginning. See, sometimes we don't lack because we don't have the potential to be great. We don't lack because we can't handle being great. Sometimes we only lack because we don't have the benefit of an initial opportunity. Sometimes all we need is that leg in, the opportunity. And a lot of times that comes in the form of working capital. Where does working capital? Money. Sometimes you need that initial money. You need that seed money in order to walk out what it is that you need in order to create wealth. We saw it happen in the beginning of the pandemic. But it's going to continue happening. So I urge you, start a business. Hear me today. Do it today. Start a business. What do? What is it that you do that's outside of your 9 to 5? Think about it. Start thinking about it. Whatever you do, how can you monetize it? All right, now, I don't care if you make $10 a week. It's not about that. If you make money from it, then now it's a business. What I need you to do is get you an LLC, limited liability company. That's how you're going to establish yourself. It's easy to do. In some states, it's free to do. But if you want to just do it like I did it, idiot proof, I'm not calling myself an idiot, but I'm just saying the way I did it, an idiot wouldn't have gone wrong. I went to the professionals. It costs money, but it's done, and it's done right. Go to LegalZoom, and this is not a paid advertisement, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them. But go to LegalZoom.com and get your LLC. Then, during the course of this pandemic, watch how, because understand that the pandemic is not over, and it's not almost over. We gonna be here for a while. That's why you can't listen to Donald Trump and his lies, because we gonna be here for a while. But he's not spiritual. He don't know. Some stuff he do know. He just lying. But we gonna be here for a while. But don't trip, because we're gonna be all right. We're gonna be fine. But we have to position ourselves so we can be on the right side of history. So let me get back. So black people are going to be successful again. We're going to build communities again. Oh, yes, we are. It's going to resemble Reconstruction. Hear me today. I'm telling you. I know I sound like, Noah talked about it raining for years and years and years and years, and nobody believed him until it rained. I'm telling y'all, it's going to resemble Reconstruction. That's why we have to do our due diligence as it relates to history. I almost wish Black History Month was November, so that before we go and cast our vote, we can understand who we are to this country. I wish that we were established as a unit now so that we can control the narrative of this election. I wish we had somebody as our leader to say what we're going to do with our vote. You know how powerful that would be? Oh my God. We could have our own party. What? But the crazy thing is they're fighting over our votes right now. The only difference is now, though, they have us divided amongst ourselves. So we're going to be successful. And now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of successful Black people, a lot of rich Black people doing their thing. But it's sporadic. It's in pockets. It's individual. But when I tell you collectively, it's coming back, man. And so here's a directive. Don't be afraid to work together. Don't start measuring who has the most, and don't get caught up in splits and who has the greater percentage and all. Let's not fight about that. I'm telling you, we are headed that way, but we have to position ourselves correctly. So start your business. That's the first thing I need you to do. And as we start to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you'll understand why I'm saying that. But start your business. That's the first thing. So it's going to resemble that of Reconstruction. Now, understand, black people, they had about a good almost 10 years. And in some cases longer than that, because in Oklahoma, it went all the way up to the 20s when they had success. But there was a time after slavery. Now, you have to give it a little bit, maybe like 5 years after. You know, it took them some time. But during that period of Reconstruction and then probably the next 10 years or so, that was probably the best time in history for our people. And the reason it was is because, for one, they were in their own community. See, integration is of the devil. Now I got to go back and get my research, do my research to figure out why we felt it's so important to integrate. But when we were amongst ourselves, the dollar stayed in the community. Think about, now those that live in Detroit that's listening to me, think about Dearborn. They got that on lock, don't they? That's how we were. We owned our stores. We had our own schools. Everything we did was our stuff. We didn't have to worry about no superiority complexes, things of that nature. Because all things were common. But we were able to create wealth by that too, though. Now, we wasn't just all poor in the community. That's the misnomer. That's what they want us to think. It's not true. It's not true. Now, in some parts of the country, it was better than in other parts. But when we were amongst ourselves, we were okay. That's all. That's what I'm trying to tell you. We were okay. But when we started looking for the government to do stuff for us, they did it. But they let you know that you were subservient. Yeah, they put you in some projects. You were a project. A project is to see what's going to happen. It was an experiment. And it's a lifelong experiment because those projects still exist. And our people are still there. Yeah, the Democrats did that. Did they do it to help us or to bind us? To bind us? It sounds like mental slavery to me. Now you're gonna always vote Democrat because they took care of us. They give us food. They give us a place to stay. They just want our vote. Look at those Republicans over there. They only care about themselves. They only care about rich people. They even got us to go along with abortion. Oh, just vote for what's best for the country. They even got us to go along with same-sex marriage. Oh, but they give us food. We're going to have somewhere to stay, somewhere to live. They're going to keep taxes down. Don't you buy into that. Hear me today. It's a lie. Lie, lie, lie. They never cared about us. They still don't care about us. We have to care about ourselves. Now, I'm trying to finish let me try to finish this again. Black people are going to be successful we're going to come into an economic power that resembles that of post-Civil War. And we are going to have an opportunity this time to change the course of history, because now history is repeating itself. But we can change this thing. We just got to do it together. How are we going to do it together? When we come into this power, we cannot let them infiltrate. When we come into this power, we can't let them commandeer. We got to stand flat foot and declare what it is that we believe and what it is we will accept and won't accept. We just got to do it. But it starts with understanding that they are not going to do anything for us. I know that I sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but this is generations of lies that we fight against. No political party cares about us. I don't care what they say. If they cared about us, why do they group our struggle with everything else? And y'all keep running around talking about Black Lives Matter, but Black Lives Matter with the LGBTQ. Black Lives Matter with that. Why Black Lives don't matter? Because Black Lives Matter. Do you see? This is another example of them dividing us, but we can't see it because it sounds good. Yes, it sounds good, but they don't mean it. We compromise our morals. We compromise on what's right because they group it all together. We compromise on what's right because there are certain programs that they're going to put in place that it appears to be for us. And yes, it may be for us, but at what cost? I don't want your housing if it's going to cost me my freedom. I don't want your food if it's going to cost me my freedom, especially when it is I can get it myself. You have the power. That's what I want. That's what I want you to hear today. You have the power. We have the power. And then I dare you to tap into your relationship with Jesus Christ. You're going to be unstoppable. You are unstoppable. So, that was a lot. It was a little weighted today. But that needed to be said. We need to understand who we are. We need to understand our value. We need to understand history so that we don't repeat that part of history. All right. I think I've talked enough today. We're going to rock out for the rest of the show. A few things that I need to make you aware of this week. Make sure you're listening because there's going to be an interview. Well, you've already seen it on YouTube, but we've seen parts of it on YouTube. But I'm interviewing attorney Rebecca Coleman. She's running for judge in the city of Harper Woods. If you're listening to me right now and you live in Harper Woods, that's who you want to vote for judge. But you'll see why before the end of this week. Very insightful interview. And so yeah, be on the lookout for that. Go get your book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. Tell everybody that you know to download the Urban Uplift app. Subscribe to the Mike Brown Morning Show on YouTube. And if you got any other requests, you want to hear certain songs or whatever like that, email me at the Mike Brown Morning Show at gmail.com. That's the Mike Brown Morning Show at gmail.com. I want you to have a wonderful, prosperous rest of your day. Claim your day. Tell your day how it's going to be. Take dominion. Understand that everywhere you walk is yours. Go and get that business. Start that business. It's yours. Why not? Who's stopping you? Have a wonderful day, folks. I'll see you right here tomorrow on the radio as we are the Mike Brown Morning Show. Have a wonderful day. We're going to rock out for the rest of this hour. Peace.
Wake up. Right here. The Mike Brown Morning Show.
Wake up, baby, won't you wake up? Hit it in the morning.
Heard weekdays 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Right here on the Urban Uplift.